Welcome. I'm Larry Olsen, and this is the Brain Vault Podcast. Did you know that the thoughts you're thinking right now are shaping the life you live tomorrow? Well, in this podcast, we just don't talk about mindset. We decode the blueprint behind behavior, performance, and possibility. This is where science meets real-world strategy, and your brain stops running on autopilot. If you're ready to turn default thinking into intentional living, you're in the right place. I've got a question for you. Have you ever felt like you're doing all the right things, but the breakthrough you know you're capable of still hasn't happened? Well, welcome to the Brain Vault Podcast, where science meets success. And if you're a leader, a high performer, or someone who knows they're capable of more, this conversation matters. Today's guest helps explain why effort, discipline, and motivation eventually stop working, and why the real answers live beneath the surface of thought. Santiago Brand is an international educator and consultant in brain mapping and neurofeedback. And I really want you to pay close attention to this. You'll find it fascinating as well as very relevant to what you're going through in your life. He uses real brain data to reveal what's actually happening when people perform, stall, or burn out. Santiago is trained as both a sport and clinical psychologist, and he began his career working with elite athletes, asking a question few people ever ask. What is the brain doing in the moments that separate great from inconsistent? That question led him to quantitative EEG brain mapping, technology that shows brain activity patterns and turns invisible obstacles into something you can finally work with. For over 17 years across more than 26 countries, Santiago has helped leaders, professionals, and everyday individuals improve focus, recover faster from stress, sleep better, and perform with greater consistency. Now, who isn't interested in that? But not by grinding harder, but by understanding the brain that's running the show. Because once you see what your brain is doing, you can't unsee it, and performance changes. Welcome, Santiago, to the Brain Vault Podcast.
Hey, Larry. Very happy to be here. Thank you for opening the space for this conversation because it's a topic that I'm really passionate about. And as you said, I have the 17 years of experience of looking at brain maps of people from across all walks of life. And that has allowed me to understand human beings at a deeper level and help them understand why, as you were expressing, they work very hard and they grind, but they don't seem to get the results that they're after or achieving the goals. And that only amounts to even more frustration, which leads to working even harder, doing more of the same, and not having a different result. So thank you for
beautiful. And that we call that insane, don't we?
We sure do.
Hey, I got an opening question for you, Santiago. When high performers see their brain map for the first time after they've done work with you, what truth about themselves hits them the hardest and why?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I would say across the board is when they find that they are not as perfect or as immutable or as invincible as they thought they were. A peak performer, especially the corporate athletes, as we call them, tend to minimize their weaknesses, or that they tend to downplay them because they see them as an obstacle. But because the corporate world is really competitive, it can be stigmatized. So when you tell CEOs that they have trauma history, because many of them do have trauma markers in the brain, or that they have emotional dysregulation in the brain, That's the one thing they don't like hearing. They don't necessarily love hearing that. They want you to tell them how great they are at what they do and how perfect they are, how different they are from the rest of the population. But
Hmm.
the truth of the matter is, even peak performers are as human as you and I. They just have the same struggles. They have the same dreams, the same nightmares, the same elements that make them sad, the same elements that make them happy. It's just that they have differently wired brains. But at the end of the day, they're not much different in terms of emotional regulation when it comes to the basic human being, the basic human foundation.
So let me ask you this. When I'm working with leaders, I talk about the difference between the brain and mind. And I talk that the brain is standard operating equipment when we pop out of the womb. We all have one. And unless someone has had, the umbilical cord wrapped around their neck or had some deprivation of oxygen, aren't we pretty much all playing with the same brain? And it's not so much that our brains are different. It's more about the experiences we've had and how we've talked to ourselves, our narrative about the experience. So you talked about trauma markers. Kind of help us explore that a little bit and define what you mean by trauma.
Of course, it's funny that you give the example of the umbilical cord because that's exactly what happened to me when I was born. I was
Oh,
born with the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, so I had
oh,
some oxygen deprivation from the
oh, for
get-go.
heaven's
And I always
sakes.
tell people, if you know me, that will help explain my my personality. Um, and it's one
That's
of
a
those
good one.
things, when you come into this world, you're exposed to these things, and it happens, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Now, your question about trauma is really important. And by trauma, I mean any kind of event that you either experienced personally or you witnessed that
Okay.
represents a danger to your well being, to your physical well being seriously harmed, or represents a threat of death. So
Mm,
you are exposed to death at a very specific moment in time or for a prolonged period of time, or you witness somebody dying. You
okay.
witness somebody being, washed away by a flood. You witness somebody dying in an earthquake. You witness somebody being shot. You witness your mom beating up your mom. All those things represent trauma responses. And oftentimes I try to stay away from using the word trauma, and I will say any unpleasant experiences that you can tell me about, because that creates more openness for the person to talk about it. Sometimes the word
Yeah.
trauma really raises the
Yeah.
stigma. So immediately the brain sets off the alarm and the person shuts down.
Yeah. Most
But
of us would like to think we're brought up in a pretty healthy environment,
yeah,
because we don't know any better. We don't have the cognitive skills yet. The frontal lobes haven't fully developed. So, it's just a nice narrative that we have when we talk to people. And that
exactly.
kind of disregards the fact that we've witnessed some things. Now, when you talk about this, is this pretty much impacted most is the amygdala the most impacted by this? Because isn't it all about making sure that we're safe and it
Mhm.
records specifically events that put us in jeopardy from watching someone die to public speaking? I mean, it really doesn't disorient itself between the two. It still
Correct.
raises an alarm bell the next time we're involved in that situation.
Yeah. Let me tell you this. Thank you for asking that question. And I use my brain model here to illustrate
Okay.
what we see. So here's your frontal lobes. This is the front of the brain. And here would be the
Okay.
back. I know that because this is the cerebellum here. But just to illustrate the people at home,
Okay.
I see several areas being impacted. There, we
Okay.
we have what we call neuromarkers, which are brainwave signatures that
Okay.
tell you there is a pattern here that is consistent with X or Y. So if we turn the brain this way and we look at this region here, this being the right lobe, the right hemisphere, this would be the temporal parietal junction. So if you take your head and you go behind your right ear, right about here, is where we have an increase in alpha frequencies. Some individuals, when we record them with the eyes open or the eyes closed, or sometimes both conditions, they have really high peak in the alpha frequencies. So in a color coded scale, it's a yellow peak that's really high. And
Hmm.
that is usually your trauma indicator. It means that the person has experienced either prenatal trauma, so they were traumatized when mommy was pregnant with them, they were traumatized when they were born, like myself with the umbilical cord. They would have experienced trauma at some point or several points in life, or maybe they have intergenerational trauma inherited from grandparents or great grandparents,
Ah,
right? A good
ah,
example is I did a brain map for an Austrian colleague of mine, and she did have that peak alpha pattern, and I said, any trauma history that you can talk about? And she said, not personally, but my grandmother was in a concentration camp in World War II. So you have the inherited components of the trauma that you don't necessarily experience, but they're passed on genetically for survival mechanisms or survival purposes, rather.
gotcha.
So
Sure.
that's one marker. Now, the
Now
insulae region,
let me interrupt just a sec.
of course, please do.
Do you have to? I know you put electrodes, kind of a cap on people's heads
Mhm.
to be able to record this. Is that firing by itself? Is it kind of a stain, if you will, in the brain, the yellow marker, or is it as a result of asking a question? Have you ever experienced trauma? And then it registers.
Oh, good
Which
question. We seldom ask any questions, and what we look
okay.
is for patterns. When we're looking at those brain
Ah,
waves, the brain speaks in terms of patterns. Some patterns
okay.
are positive, meaning you have good emotional regulation and you can perform well under pressure. You can have good focus skills. You can be laser focused. And some patterns speak of dysregulation, meaning the wiring of the brain has become faulty. And that's
Ah,
when the complaints arise for the individual. So if you see that pattern arising more than it should, then it's a red flag that we now look at more closely. So, and the alpha pattern is one of those.
okay.
Now, we
And
will also see
alpha being a brain wave.
that the alpha brainwave, correct,
Okay.
is a
Okay.
specific oscillation, and in that part of the brain, it indicates the trauma response. We call it.
Okay.
There's a paper that calls it the electrical aftermath, which I really like. The
Oh, that's
electrical
very cool.
aftermath. So when we're looking at your patterns because you need assistance, we're talking about the electrical aftermath. And what you were saying is the person is not talking. It's
Okay.
everything that we see in the brain is a byproduct of your life. From the moment you
Okay.
were in, when your mom was pregnant with you, to the moment you are coming to see us for a brain scan. Anything that
Okay.
has happened will influence the wiring of your brain for good or bad. And we strengthen the positive things and we fine tune and would stabilize those negative things that are getting in the way of you living a productive and happy life.
So when you say you strengthen the positive and bring up the negative, how are you strengthening and how are you bringing it up? Give people an
Well,
example of you just took the cap off my head and you started examining it. What kind of things would you share with me? How would that go? How would you go about that?
Very good question. The first of all, the nice thing about doing a brain map is that I don't get any previous information about it before you come. The only thing I
Uh,
will know is your age and gender, but that's
okay.
it because I need to have that for specific information. But I will record your brainwave activity for about 10 to 12 minutes with your eyes open. You're sitting
Okay.
there, you're staring at the wall, you're not doing much. You can be in there with your thoughts or trying to meditate.
Have you
It really
told me
doesn't.
anything that I should be doing while I'm sitting there?
No, not at all. And
Not
sometimes people will
necessarily.
ask me, "What should I do?" I said, "Whatever you want to do. Just refrain from moving too much."
I
Sometimes
got you.
people
Okay.
will hum a song. Sometimes people will, recite a verse or sit there
Okay.
with their own thoughts. And then we
Yeah.
do the same with the eyes closed for another 10 to 12 minutes. And while I'm doing that, I will be looking for those patterns. So if I see a pattern, for example, that indicates to me that you tend to drift away and lose your focus, I will say, it looks to me like you tend to drift away from time to time, right? And you'll smirk and you go, yep, that that happens. So sometimes people smile, sometimes people frown, but their nonverbal responses tell me that I'm, hitting the mark. Or
Okay.
if I'm doing that for a child or a teenager, I will tell the parents, it looks to me like little Johnny here has some tantrums, right? And the parents they look at each other and go, yeah, how do you know that? So I'm picking up info about you just by looking at your brainwave patterns. And that's really important because it creates the objectivity in that I know what I'm talking about, but it's just based on what your brain is telling me. I'm just,
Okay.
relaying the message back to you. I speak
Because
the language.
it's real easy to sit here and see, well, yeah, every young child has had tantrums. Yeah, we've all had, and so if you take the devil's advocate kind of, it's like you're bringing subjectivity into an objective process. I can see why you don't want any preconceived notions and people telling you things before, or you can't help but look for that, right? It's kind of the challenge that we face as observers as we contaminate the experience. So
Yeah.
how do you keep fresh and clean on this so you can overcome that skepticism that people might have that you're reading a crystal ball or you're into astrology? I have no objection on either one of those. Don't misunderstand me.
No, of
But
course. Yeah.
I think from a science perspective, you're attempting to be as clean as possible and let the scan give you the information as opposed to you superimposing the information on the scan.
Correct.
So
Number
how
one,
do you do that personally?
number one is the way you frame it. And I
Okay.
always will frame the info to have it resonate with their life in a way that that it can resonate with their life and their own personality and their own experiences.
Okay.
So I will say this is how it would manifest for you. This is how anger manifests for you. And most of the time I hit the market around 80 to 85% accuracy,
Okay.
because I
Sometimes
always ask the
people will go,
person,
no, that's not the case.
yeah. And sometimes
Sometimes.
people don't know. Now,
That's pretty
oftentimes people
strong,
tell
80,
me,
85.
yeah,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Sometimes people will tell me, well, you're not telling me anything I don't know. And I say, yeah, that's fair. But now we know that you're not crazy, that you're not making this up. It's coming from your brain. So it's
Uh,
really not your fault to a degree. Your brain is dysregulated. Now we can fix this. We can really train this brain to help
okay.
you overcome these obstacles.
Oh, for heaven's
And
sakes.
we know what parts of the brain, because in other settings like talk therapy, and I'm not undermining talk therapy, but in talk therapy you cannot really tell by talking to somebody.
Mm,
You really have to look at the organ that's in charge of behavior, which is the brain, and you don't know what's causing that dysregulation and that unwanted or abnormal behavior until you look into it. I
yeah.
always give the example: you have stomach pain, and you go to the emergency room because you cannot tolerate the pain, and the doctor says, "Okay, I'm gonna cut you open to find out what the problem is." You're not gonna let them do it. First they have to do an X-ray, they have to run blood tests. A doctor's not gonna cut you open just because it could be something as simple as gas or parasites, indigestion, that is causing
Okay.
extreme pain, right? With the brain, we need to do the same. We need to go into the brain and look at the patterns so that we can help you understand. Let me give you a good example. We have something called epileptic for non-epileptic and epileptic discharges. So epileptic discharges is misfire in the brain that will cause somebody to have seizures or convulsions,
Okay.
specifically epilepsy, right?
Yep.
But some individuals will have this non-epileptic discharges, meaning they have the activity in the brain, but it's not strong enough to cause a seizure or convulsion. It causes other symptoms, right?
Uh,
So,
yeah.
for example, 40%, 4 out of 10 individuals who are diagnosed with ADHD will have this content in their brain.
Hmm.
And we know because we can see it in the scan. And they don't know because they never had a seizure. But this activity may be related to their hyperactivity, to their daydreaming. And so they
Lack of
go
focus.
to therapy, they get the wrong medication, and nothing works for them because
It's
we
usually
haven't looked at,
Adderall, huh?
yeah, Adderall or Ritalin or whatnot,
Yeah.
right? And in some
Yeah.
instances, if you have individuals with this activity and you give them a stimulant, you're gonna make them
Oh,
even worse because
gotcha.
it's like trying to put out a fire by throwing more gasoline on it.
Yeah.
So the great advantage for people who are listening to this is we can prescribe the right intervention for you. If you need medication, a doctor can prescribe the right medication based on your own brainwave activity, something that will
Gotcha.
work for you. This is not guessing. This is not
Yeah.
trial and error. This is more specific and objective science. And to me, that's the biggest takeaway that I think people should learn from this.
Let me ask you this. There's some things that can be aided and resolved um, with medication, with a drug. And there's other things that awareness and the opportunity to, and this is what I'm kind of interested in with what you're sharing, not that I'm not interested in all of it, um, is changing the narrative. I wanted to talk to you about this. Okay. So I find out I've had this trauma, and maybe it was passed down genetically, and I'm getting this symptom that I've made up my own mind that it happened at this point in my life. I may be way off, but I had to come up with something because I can't consciously remember what happened from the genetic pass down. Um, and then I go to you, and you find out this area has impacted me. And do you get into neuroplasticity? Do you get into helping me create a new neural network, a new pattern that is much more beneficial to me than continuing to pay attention to the old one? And now that I'm conscious and aware of it, I don't feel like I'm just being a positive thinker. I don't feel like I'm just creating affirmations. I feel like I'm really understanding now and knowing why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm way off or not, but I'm really curious about how you assist someone in resolving this element that they now have new awareness to.
Oh, you're absolutely spot on with this. What I tell people is most of the people who come to see me, they've been through therapy, or they've
Okay.
tried different forms of different modalities of intervention.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
most of them will tell me talk therapy doesn't work. What I
Okay.
will tell them is that's not necessarily true. What the
Okay.
problem is, not that we're looking at your brain, is that your brain is wired in a way, and it's not permitting you to, first of all, understand the message from talk therapy, learn it, interiorize it, and utilize it properly. So your
Okay.
brain is blocking you from benefiting from the talk therapy or any other form of intervention. And that's why you're here, because you feel stuck. You feel you cannot get the change. And
Okay.
I will talk about neuroplasticity. I will tell them when we train your brain, all that wiring you're bringing with you now, we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to create new connectivity. We're going to rewire your brain so that you have a more optimal way of doing things. Your life is not going to be perfect by any means, but you don't have to suffer as much. You don't have to be in
Okay.
so much emotional pain or psychological pain or behavioral pain. You can
Okay.
have a more meaningful life. And in the beginning, you mentioned the brain and the mind. And to me, the way I see it is, to access the mind, we need to rewire the brain first. Because once you are able to fine tune and optimize brain activity, then your mindset, it's different. And now you
Yeah.
have the ability to understand the message, but more importantly, you have the ability to utilize the skill that you learn more efficiently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this relates to everything: anger management, peak performance, depression, anxiety, PTSD, you name it. Once we have access to your brain, once we can see the faulty patterns, once we train your brain and correct, now the mind is more easily accessible, and now you can change the narrative efficiently. But
Mm.
unless we really correct the neuronal underpinning, the neurophysiological dysregulation in the brain, it's very difficult, nearly impossible, to really change your narrative.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
many times after I've done brain training, I will suggest to people the option to go back to talk therapy, and many of them embrace it. Many of them
Yeah.
go, yeah, I see what you were telling me in the beginning. I'm going to go back to it, and they benefit from it. Some people will say, I really don't think I need it. I'm fine, but I will explore the possibility in the future. Some people can function very well after brain training by itself. Most of the time, I find that if you combine it with the therapy, that's the best thing, because the therapy
Yeah.
gives you the actionable. The brain training rewires the brain, but you need to learn the skill, and that's what you learn from therapy. You learn the
Gotcha.
skill and the applicability into your everyday life.
So if I came to you, the process would be to first scan my brain
Yes,
without
that's
knowing
that's
why
step
I'm
number
there,
one.
basic. Number
Yeah,
one.
I don't look at anybody without looking at their brain at this
Yeah.
point in my career.
Yeah. And then we have a conversation about what you've seen and has this ever occurred and if you've ever had experienced um and then you set me up. Then do you also get involved in the therapy or do you pass that off on to someone else?
Yeah, yeah. I specialize in brain training, but I
Okay.
have my network and my team of people that I
Okay.
work with. And
Got
the way it works is it's a holistic approach. So
it. Okay.
what I normally refer people to is after I've done the brain scan, I in Singapore in our clinic we work with a nutritionist here. And I will tell the client, now I would love for you to go and do some metabolic testing. Because what I find is that 99.9% of the time, if someone has brain dysregulation, they're going to have some form of metabolic dysregulation, maybe
Ah,
hormonal imbalances, food intolerances, lack of vitamins. And once they do the metabolic testing, we can combine both. So they can do brain training, they can do supplementation, nutritional adjustments. And
sure.
now some of the counselors in our clinic also refer clients to us for the brain mapping. So whenever I'm feeding the info back, I have the client and I have their therapist in there. And based on
Yeah.
the brainwave patterns, I can provide suggestions to the therapist as to what kind of therapeutic intervention better works for that brain. What
Gotcha.
is likely to be more successful. It always ends up being a holistic approach. We do a heavy focus on sleep because that's one of the main problems facing people today. A lot of people are neglecting their sleep because they're stressed or
You bet.
because it's become a badge of honor in our society. The more sleep deprived we are, the more we get
Yeah, isn't that
reinforced by
sad?
society. And it's not a good thing. It's not it's
No,
not a good
not at all. Not at all. I know when I found out I had sleep apnea, which I don't know how many years I had it, but then when I took care of that, and now I get anywhere from 7 to 9 hours a day. And I don't know how much of it is REM or not. I've never been tested, but it's a whole different reality that I'm experiencing now. And I think what's important to people too is they don't recognize the poison, the literal poison that alcohol does to their opportunity for their brain to function at its highest level. And our society is just so naive in the sense of its profit over people. And I don't mean to be on the bandstand here, but they get such wrong information that we've got such obesity and we've got people doing all kinds of things to try to clear their mind. And most of it is only making things worse. So I wanted to ask you a quick question here. And I want to get clarity on this so I'm not providing bad information, if you will, because you're the expert. Um, I talk about the mind as simply being the narrative, the conversation we have going on 24/7. And I also talk about the fact that these words create pictures, bring about emotion, and are the creation of these neural networks, which we have called habits, attitudes, beliefs, and expectations. And yet, the brain now, a lot of neuroscientists call it a servo mechanism, which is literally a robot. It does exactly what it's programmed to do. And so we can keep reiterating, I hope this doesn't happen today. And we don't realize we're creating that image of what we don't want to have happen. So then it happens, and I didn't want that to happen, but that's what we were thinking about. We've all experienced that. And you can do it just the opposite as well. But people are so skeptical, especially all the hurts that they've had and the misinformation that they've received, is they have so much skepticism that when they do go to talk therapy or they do get some assistance, they find a reason not to think it's valuable or that they don't really know who I am. And this is what I think so brilliant about what you're doing is you're giving them the facts, the science, the here's what's going on. And this is even something that you may have inherited, since you can't seem to recall what created this what did you call it? The yellow marking, what was that called?
The alpha peak, the alpha waves. Yeah,
Yeah, the alpha waves. So this to me sounds like $30,000 later, I've got a little more insight. Is this highly expensive? Is this practical for the average individual to be able to have their mind mapped and then choose, whether they want to continue the therapy or not?
absolutely. I find that it's rather cost effective, more so than some years ago, because now the technology is
Okay,
more efficient,
gotcha.
and also we can make it more competitive in terms of the pricing. Depending on where you are in the world, the brain map can run you between $300 to $700, um,
Okay.
which is a specialized session. You're sitting there for about 2 to 3 hours. We're explaining everything
Wow.
to you in detail. We're
Wow.
really answering your questions. So it's really good bang for your buck, if you will.
Yeah. Now,
It's not invasive.
are you involved in a global group, or are you specifically in your area?
Well, I'm in Singapore. I'm based in Singapore, but if people contact me and they want me to help them find somebody in their neck of the woods, I would be more than happy to, because I have
Okay.
colleagues and friends all over the world, not in every corner, of course, but many
Sure.
places. And if not, I can point them to where they can look for these resources, websites where
Beautiful.
they have listings of more certified professionals. So yes, I can definitely help people find a practitioner, a provider for them.
Beautiful.
And it's not invasive. So you
Yeah.
sit there, it's painless, it's very comfortable, and you really get very, very useful and rich information.
Yeah.
And I always frame this in a way that people feel understood. I'm not diagnosing. I'm doing simply an interpretation of the brainwave activity, and I will relate it in a way that they can feel understood.
Beautiful.
I
Beautiful.
have very emotional responses. I've had people tell me, in the 2 hours that I've spent with you, I've received more insight than I've received in years of therapy.
Wow.
Or teenagers, who come to the office. When they come see me, they never greet me, they never say hi, they go sit on the chair because they're thinking another strain who's going to
Sure.
analyze me. But
Yeah.
once I take out the cap and we start looking at brainwaves, their demeanor changes. And as I'm feeding the info back to them, many of them start crying.
Oh,
Teenagers tend to be really standoffish, and they just let down their defenses and they
yeah.
cry, and they
Oh,
turn to the parents. They say, "See, I told you, I'm not making this up." And
yeah.
they
Oh,
look at me and they tell me, it's the first time that somebody's not judging me. You're understanding me. And I love that. I love when people
oh,
can feel that they're feeling understood, that
yeah.
they're providing with hope. The main thing for me is to give people hope that
Yeah.
there is a solution out there for them. And that's
That's that
wonderful.
moment. That's that moment where your dopamine and oxytocin and all the
Yes.
wonderful drugs are dripping inside of you. I would imagine that's why you do what you do, for those
Yes,
moments.
it is absolutely. I love it because it helps me ease people's suffering.
Mm,
Because I know most people out there are suffering in silence.
you bet. Yeah.
And I don't want people to suffer in silence. And I
Yeah.
love it because it breaks the stigma around mental health.
Sure.
It
Sure.
helps people understand that we all go through the same. You could be anybody listening out there who thinks they're holier than thou. I can guarantee you that if I scan your brain, I'm going to find some level of dysregulation, and I'm going to find behaviors that you exhibit that you think are normal, but other people may not like. So
Yeah.
you're not as
Yeah.
perfect or as special as you think you are.
Right.
You're not a bad person, but
Right.
you're just human. We're all human. We all have a brain, and as long as we have a brain, we have happy moments, but we also have moments of pain and suffering. And we
Yeah.
will have things that are interfering, getting in the way of a happy life. And that's the message I want to bring to people, that if you work on your brain, there is hope for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Santiago, even though people discover those that few that think they're perfect, it's actually good news when they recognize what's really going on, because we're all works in progress, but we can't get better if we're working on the wrong thing or working with the wrong methodology. And
Correct.
then we get frustrated, and that's where this real skepticism starts to dig in. Um, and I think you nailed it with teenagers. The old adage, you want to hire a teenager while they still know everything, right? And for you to
Right.
watch that breakdown of the real, I'm to be understood instead of sounding like a victim or sounding like a complainer. Something is really going on, and to be able to then start to reprogram the brain, which sounds more sophisticated than it really is, because we're just going back to changing the narrative, and now it's more self-directed than it is hoping that we find the right drug or the right surgery or all of the old methodologies we've used to resolve
Right.
things. That there's really other ways, and you're providing that. I mean, I could ask you a million questions, and the time has just flown. How do people get a hold of you? And then what would you suggest to people who are listening to this, feeling stuck, maybe a little glimmer of hope as a result of hearing what you have to say? What would you share with them, and how do they go about getting a hold of you?
Well, I will always tell people seek help. It's okay not to be okay. And I always tell people it's okay to, uh, you shouldn't care about what people think of you. As long as you're not doing anything illegal or immoral, of course. Those are the two boundaries. But as long as you're not doing anything illegal or immoral, who cares? You shouldn't really care about what people think of you. And if you want to seek help in private, do it. But seek help. Help
Yeah.
is out there. There's many of us who are very passionate about this
Yeah.
because I have many friends and colleagues around the world who are as passionate or even more passionate than I am about the brain, who are there to help you. If people want to contact me, my website is www.santiagobrand.com. They can also reach me on Instagram at NeuroSantiago. My YouTube is Santiago Brand. So if they search, they'll see my picture there, and they can subscribe to the channel. Instagram, the website again, www.santiagobrand.com. YouTube Santiago Brand, and Instagram Neuro Santiago. That's the three ways I'm mostly active.
What a perfect last name.
I know, right?
What
I
brand
get I
is it?
get a
It's
you.
a Santiago brand.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, you're a delight. Very much
Well,
enjoyed the
thank you.
conversation. And I'm going to reach out to you to find out about, if you have any recommendations in the Southern California area, um, to be able to get mapped, because I think it's fascinating. And I think what most people don't recognize, even though genetics, plays a small part in who we are, nature versus nurture. They say anywhere from 18 to 20% is genetic, and the rest is learned behavior. Um, if that gene has put something into your inheritance that's not in your best interest, only because it's causing you to behave in a way that is not productive or beneficial to you or those around you, that's good to know. And you talk about people should seek help. I would phrase that people need a coach, for crying out loud. They need a mental
Yeah,
coach, because even the greatest athletes have coaches. Nobody can see what others can see. We get so caught up in our own world, in our own mind, in our own ideas, and then we just look for information to support those beliefs, whether they're good for us or not. And you come with such a fresh, clean, scientific perspective on helping people, assisting people through coaching and your feedback. Feedback's a breakfast of champions, as you know.
absolutely.
And right, and we just need more of it. So, thank you for your time. I can feel your heart. You're a amazing and wonderful human being,
Well,
and
thank you.
we're all blessed that we had the opportunity to hear from you today.
Thank you. I had a blast. I love doing these interviews because I love spreading the word. And thank you again for opening the opportunity to talk about this, something I'm very passionate about. And it is, of course, the brain, but also helping our fellow human beings.
Amen. Amen. And thank you for all of you tuning in. As I've talked before, the only thing you can't get back in your life is your time. So make sure you're maximizing those opportunities. I would encourage you to find a brain mapping center around, reach out to Santiago, those of you that aren't in Singapore, and, get some feedback that's going to allow you to break through some of those mental barriers, create that aha moment where you realize, wow, I can do something about that, and then take action, as you have by dialing and tuning into us. So all the best to all of you. And once again, thank you, Santiago. And we'll all see you next time.